Hey, it's Ukallii. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are covering Chapter 12 of my Harry Potter rewrite fanfiction. So this chapter starts off the same way that it did in the original version, but other than that, there's been quite a lot of moving pieces around from this point forward in the fanfiction. I've done a lot of taking a scene from here and putting it there, putting it before and after, that kind of thing. So if you read the original version of this fanfiction, you'll notice a lot of these scenes are out of order. I've just changed the order to make it, to stretch out time a bit more, stretch out the events a bit more, and give it a better flow, because everything was kind of tightly packed together in the first, like, 2 weeks they were in Shehu, and then nothing happened. So that's the major changes that have happened. A lot of the differences that I'm going to point out in this chapter are because of those changes of, like, when things happen. So this chapter starts off with Rose waking up and asking what the hell Harry did to Zhang and Elizabeth last night to make them leave. She finds it, you know, she realizes immediately what's going on, though. Harry has realized that they aren't interested in him as a person, they're interested in him as a public figure, as a celebrity, as a Potter, and so he kind of brushed them off because of that. And she explains that to Remus, who's a bit of a drama queen in this chapter a little bit, being over dramatic about how Harry, you know, acts as a teenager, and it's just kind of starting to sink into him that Harry is actually a teenager and isn't just a little kid who needs his help. So that's part of his development in this chapter. Rose then asks if they're going to go to Potter Manor. In the original version, they did. They immediately went to Potter Manor and then they went to the Lee estate. I've switched that. I've had them go to the Lee estate first because it just makes sense. As Remus explains, you show up to a place that you're going to live in and you immediately go look somewhere you know you're not going to live. Like, that's not how it works. You set up your personal, you know, where you're going to sleep before you go looking at curiosities. So Remus says, no, we're gonna go figure out the Lee estate first, and then he says we can go to a vantage point at the top of the village and we can look at the estate from there, and you can see everything from there, but you have to, you know, not be afraid of heights. So of course Rose doesn't go because she's afraid of heights. As they're going up, there's this conversation that happens between Harry, Aunt Mei-Ling, and Remus, where they talk a bit about the Lee family and how the Lee family kind of factors into everything. And one thing that Aunt Mei-Ling points out is that a member of the Lee family, her great aunt, is the one who established the Eden bathhouse in Edinburgh. The Lee family is known for their water magic. Now, this is to kind of a way to kind of nod to Asian magical traditions. But that's going to come up later in the series, the fact that the Lee family, which Harry is distantly related to, he's not closely related to, the closest member of the Lee family he has is his great-grandfather, so he's kind of distantly related to the Lee family, but he still has that within him, that water magic, and that's important for the way that his magic works, as Ollivander explains later in the chapter. Aunt Mei-Ling refers to Harry's great-grandfather as Gong Gong. Gong Gong is a kind of colloquial nickname, like Grammy or Graham or something like that. That kind of a nickname. So that's the name that is used there. It comes from the fact that a wife will call her husband Lao Gong. So Gong Gong is husband's dad. So it's going further up the line in that way. I'm fairly certain that's the etymology behind it. Aunt Mei-Ling also explains that the Lee estate is not just the estate, like the house of the Lee family. It's more than that. It's kind of become something of like a little village of its own. It's worked kind of like an embassy where people who are visiting the country from China and Asia in general will go there instead of going to Edinburgh or London or whatnot. And there are hotels and there's hostels and there's shops and there's all that kind of stuff in this estate. You've got a lower village which has like houses and shops and things like that. You've got the sort of middle section, which is like the main businesses of the estate. You've got a bathhouse, you've got water treatment plant, you've got a great hall, and then you've got the Lee estate, it's the Lee courtyard house, and then on the side you've got a few like auxiliary buildings, I guess you could say. There's like a schoolhouse which will come into play later in the series, very big part actually in the plan. You've got these kind of something like government houses, sort of, and those are used by the people who are going to restore the manor in the next few chapters. So you've got all these buildings. This place is going to come alive, but right now it's empty. It's not in ruins. It's just empty because it gets cleaned every year, but like no one's been living there for years. So in this chapter, that whole estate comes alive again and is brought back to life and is restored. Aunt Mei Ling says that Gong Gong sent her a letter. He's on his way. He's crossing the Atlantic Ocean, which in this time you really couldn't do because of the mini ice age, but they're magical. They have the ability to do it, and whenever he arrives, you see how they managed to do it. They head out to the estate to check things out, and as they're going over there, Aunt Mei Ling questions why there aren't that many magical creatures who have moved into the abandoned village, basically. And Remus foreshadows, he says they're probably at the manor feeding on the magic. If you read the original version, you know that that's exactly what's going on. The manor has become this kind of hub of magical creatures, which we'll see in a later chapter. But right now he's just bringing that up. He's just mentioning that that's probably where all these magical creatures are. Then they arrive at the Lee house, and Aunt Mei Ling and Remus have this kind of, not really argument, but they're like trying to figure out whose room will be whose based on magical feng shui. Now it's backwards in this fanfiction. That's something Remus actually admits to. He says it's actually flipped the other way around. Mostly because I'd already picked the location of the manor, and I'd already picked the location of the Lee estate before I looked into feng shui. If I'd done it the other way around, I would have had everything be on the other side of the lock, but I didn't, and I already planned everything out and everything, and I didn't want to have to flip anything, so that is actually why the feng shui is backwards. It's not because of any magical theory, it's just I should have done that research before I planned out the estate, and I didn't, so I flipped it just to make it easier. So instead of north being for business and south being for reputation, it's the other way around in this universe, whatever you want to call it. After that, we have a little time jump of about a week. It's like 5 days or so. But they're cleaning up the house and people are moving back into the Lee estate, and this is all happening over the next few days. And Harry, there's a little bit of narration where Harry says that he's feeling better because he's doing something more normalized. He's cleaning, he's cooking, he's doing things that are normal to him again, and it kind of calms him down a bit. This is actually important because later in the fanfiction there's a chapter where he kind of breaks down because he hasn't been doing those things, and it just kind of starts driving him crazy a little bit. And that becomes important for his future characterization, but right now it's just kind of hinted at. He's calm and he's feeling more at home because he's able to clean and cook and do normal things. So they've repaired things. They've got repairs going to the bathhouse. There's some repairs going to the Great Hall, and Harry is starting to get used to people treating him like a member of the community. He's starting to get used to this community now because everyone's so down to earth, you know, and it's easier for him to get used to that because of that. But one thing that he is not getting used to very easily is the schedule. Not waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, not cleaning and cooking once that's all finished, not having people yell at him, not having to prepare dinner, not doing those things. It starts to bother him. And the one thing that he's really, really struggling with is having his own room. He's never had his own room. He slept in the cupboard next to the stairs at the Privet Drive. He slept in the nursery before that, and while he was in Edinburgh, he slept in a room, but he always woke up in different rooms, so it was kind of weird for him. He didn't really adjust to having his own room, so now that he has like a designated room that is his room, it's just weird for him. It's weird. It's hard for him to get used to that. So that's a struggle that he's slowly getting used to as he's living there, but it's going to take all summer for him to get used to that idea. We can also see a little hint that he is still traumatized. He's still waking up throughout the night anxiously because he hasn't prepared breakfast, and he's worried he's going to get in trouble. He's constantly worried that he's going to get punished. Like, this is more of that trauma coming through, and that's going to become bigger as the chapters go on and we reach further chapters. It's something that I've added to this version, the edited version of this fan fiction, that trauma. He's also worried about Gong Gong. He's worried about how Grandfather Li is going to respond to him. He's worried that Grandfather Li is going to disapprove of this little Irish street rat, basically, in his mind. He doesn't think he's worthy of that kind of reputation, so he's scared of Grandfather Li arriving. But he gets distracted by the, I think I'm saying this right, Qixi Festival. I think I said that right. It's basically Chinese Valentine's Day. And of course, Zhang and Elizabeth are so excited about that, and they try to give Harry presents, and Aunt Mei Ling thankfully warns him before they do, and he realizes what's going on. But there's a cute little scene of Rose kind of eating their cakes that were meant for Harry, their love cakes. And then Draco showing up and of course flirting with them both, eating their cakes and whatnot. So it's just a cute little moment that really demonstrates the fact that Harry just does not see them romantically, and demonstrates Rose is like kind of making fun of them, and Draco's just ridiculous flirting habit of flirting with everyone that he talks to. We're then introduced to Lord Abraxas Malfoy. He is a canonical character. He's in the books. He's mentioned in the 6th book. After he dies, Slughorn says that he's sorry to Draco for hearing that he lost his grandfather and that he was a good scholar. So I ran with that and made Abraxas Malfoy a blood scholar. So his research is all focused on blood magic and how that stuff transmutes and everything like that. And so he's really interested in things like, how do Muggleborns exist? How do you stop squibs from happening? Things like that. So Harry has asked Draco to ask Abraxas Malfoy to come and evaluate him and Rose and figure out what the situation is with their transference and make sure that the Hulajing poison is out of Harry's system. So that's why he's there. He's there kind of as a healer's capacity, kind of as a geneticist almost. There to do some research and make sure that Harry's okay. So he'll be there for the entire summer, and then he'll come back later after he's done more research at the Malfoy Manor. He'll come back later during the holiday, the winter holiday, to kind of give the results that he's found. In the meantime, Draco says that he will keep Harry entertained and help him deal with the girls. That becomes kind of a full-on job for him while he's in Shehu, just dealing with trying to get the girls to give up on Harry because they don't take the hint. So as a result of that, he doesn't do what he'd originally planned, which was to teach Harry some of the norms and practices of purebloods. He doesn't get to that, and that becomes a problem later on in the series, but that was his plan. He was going to come and he was going to teach Harry the customs and traditions of pureblood kids so that Harry would fit in better at Hogwarts. Mr. Ollivander shows up, as he'd planned to do in previous chapters. He shows up and he's ready to make Harry's wand. He evaluates Harry's magic and he says, oh, you've calmed down a lot, but your magic is so symbiotic and so natural, really need a natural source. And so they go looking for materials for Harry's wand. Now in the original books, Harry's wand is an oak wand, which if I remember correctly, J.K. Rowling chose because it's Harry's Celtic wandwood or something like that. And that's why she chose it. I looked up the properties of oak wood on the Harry Potter Wikia, and I didn't think the properties matched my Harry, so I chose a different wandwood. I picked Rowan because Rowan wands are rare, but they're very cooperative, according to Pottermore, and according to what J.K. Rowling has put out, in her weird post-Potter information dumps that she's done. Rowan wood is this cooperative wood, and it's very natural, and it enhances the abilities of the user. I thought it was perfect for Harry. And there's also the myths of Rowan being affiliated with with death, and Rowan also being a Chinese wood, which worked perfectly, so that's why I picked Rowan. They find that there's a Wiggentree. Wiggentrees are a magical version of a Rowan tree that is present in the Harry Potter series. This is canonical stuff, so I just used it. To have a magical tree giving a magical wood for Harry's wandwood, it just made sense to me. In Wicca, Rowan trees are also known as Wickening trees. So when a newborn is born, they bring them to a Rowan tree and touch the Rowan tree as luck, as good luck. So they all, including Zhang and Elizabeth, they all get in a boat and head off to Druid's Grove. This section of them going to Druid's Grove is taken directly from the older version, but with some edits. For example, in the original version of these scenes, the tutor is there already because it happens after Grandfather Li has arrived. that's not the case anymore, so I've changed that. And instead we've got Draco and Abraxas there as well. There's some talk about Druid's Grove here, and it's an old village, it's for the Druids, it's where the Druids came from, which is the origin of the Potter family. They were originally Druids. So you've got this, this village of really old pureblood families that originated from England. They're insular families rather than being from France that later immigrated, or Saxons that immigrated, or whatever. They're originally insular Celtic families. So there are not very many of those. I've been looking through the Harry Potter Wikia and Pottermore looking for the pureblood families that might have had that kind of history, and most of them are French, most of them are Saxon. So I've found a few of them, a handful of them, that it would make sense for them to have lived in Druid's Grove for a time. The Selwyns, the Pruitt family, Molly's family, and the Lovegoods. So there's a few of them that would have originated from Druid's Grove and lived there originally, and those are the families that are going to migrate to Druid's Grove. The Longbottoms as well used to have a house in Druid's Grove, but as is explained in the history of Druid's Grove in this fanfiction, Grindelwald burned down Druid's Grove, and then Voldemort came and attacked as well. So Druid's Grove is abandoned. It's completely abandoned. It's become a gravesite. It's become a ghost town. And Druid tradition and Celtic tradition is that whenever a place becomes an origin of death and necropolis, you hang up these blessed ribbons that act as a way to satiate the ghosts and kind of calm the spirits, and still give them respect and recognition. The village is covered in these ribbons. They're all over the place because of how many people have died there and how many times people have visited and left ribbons as a sign of respect. And so it's kind of ghostly. In the first version of this fanfiction, Harry has a vision as they're going up the river. He has a vision of his parents. I wanted to keep that with the Potter Manor chapter. So because they're not going to Potter Manor right now, because that's not the first time they're going to Druid's Grove, I have removed both of those visions that were there and moved them to the Potter Manor chapter, which I think is the next chapter because it happens right after this. There's a little bit of foreshadowing. Aunt Maylene says that they should definitely not stay after nightfall because they're very close to the Ghost Festival, which is the next festival that's going to come up in 2 weeks to talk, and I'll talk about that whenever we get there. They reach the center of town and they go to the rowan tree, the Wiggentree, and it's got the bowtruckles on the bark. The bowtruckles are introduced in the original book, I think in the 3rd or 5th book, one of those two. So they're a canonical creature. Of course, they become more famous in the Fantastic Beasts series because the little bowtruckle that follows Newt Scamander around. So you've got bowtruckles living in this tree, and you've also got will-o'-the-wisps living in this tree. Will-o'-the-wisps are a traditional creature. They never showed up in the Harry Potter series, but they are a traditional mythological creature affiliated with death that are kind of like tree spirits, and they guide people around, but they linger around places that have death, so of course they would be all over Druid's Grove. Mr. Ollivander leaves wood lice for the bowtruckles to distract them so he can get the wood, and when he's doing that, the bowtruckles instead get distracted by Harry, and they're really interested in Harry. They're like staring at him, and they like climb up onto a branch, and they break a branch off for him. They're giving him a gift of a piece of wandwood for him to use voluntarily rather than him having to like take a branch. This is a foreshadowing of future books, and this is kind of a way to point out the way Harry's magic works. His magic is super symbiotic. It really connects to natural sources. So magical creatures love Harry. They love him. They adore him. And so it becomes kind of a problem as the books go on that magical creatures are so attracted to him, and as Abraxas Malfoy will point out, it might not be a good thing that they're so attracted to him. It might be a bad sign. Harry wants to give them some food because they gave the bowtruckles the wood lice. He'd like to give the will-o'-the-wisps some food. And Remus says that they feed on tormented souls. Well, he doesn't have one of those, so he gives them some blood. And this is a way that you can see Harry's kind of instinctual way of connecting to these magical creatures. He can just kind of figure out, sense what to do with them as part of the symbiosis with his magic. Draco says something to piss them off. This is an ongoing joke in the Harry Potter series that Draco is terrible with magical creatures. So he accidentally pisses them off and they swarm and attack him. And then they head back to the village for the festival. When they get there, Mr. Ollivander's grandson is there. He's gone collecting ingredients and been chased off by wolves. And he lists off all the ingredients that he's collected for Mr. Ollivander. I put together this list of ingredients based on what I know about chemistry and what I know about herbal remedies, and I actually looked up some recipes for like natural teas and things like that to make this recipe. Mr. Ollivander does a bit of potion making and creating the interior glaze of the wand as a way to kind of insulate it and protect it, and also an exterior glaze to just keep it from chipping and that kind of thing, and allow it to absorb magic a bit more effectively from the environment around him. The core of the wand, just like in the original stories, is the phoenix feather that was originally used by Voldemort. Now this becomes a problem later on. I will get to that. I will explain why it becomes a problem later on. It's not because of the canonical issues in Harry Potter. It's kind of an expansion of those canonical issues in Harry Potter about Harry and Voldemort's wand being in the same place. Mr. Ollivander very ominously tells Harry that his wand the phoenix feather in his wand is the brother of Voldemort's, and that is the end of the chapter. So that's it for this chapter. The next chapter starts off in September, but it's not a time jump. It's just that we're at the end of August now, and the next chapter is like 2 or 3 days later. But it starts off the next month, so we finally enter into September, and they go off to Potter Manor. So we will get to that next time. For now, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time with Chapter 13.